Let's take this timeline back a bit for today's video. Let's go back to the 90s. The early 90s. Back when Will Smith was a Fresh Prince, Xena was a dancing warrior, and Anna Chlumsky was everybody's girl. It was a lovely time. But seriously, guys, nostalgia aside, politics was going through a kind of revolution of its own, right? In the 90s, NAFTA had been signed into legislation. I'll leave a link above so that you can kind of learn more about that, because that's what I had to do. So NAFTA was being signed into legislation.
Organized labor and our working people, our farming community, and our environmental organizations.
We were losing all of these jobs to Mexico. The Democrats were losing seats in the House and then the Senate.
The tide of change is rising.
And then a 22-year-old from Tyler, Texas, was about to change the way that America looked at Latino outreach from then on. I'm Beasia, guys. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome to the Activist Teacher. Today we're going to continue our chat about the first part of Tio Bernie by CHUCK ROCHA. I am super excited. I'm going to try and tamp down the excitement just a little bit. If you have not seen the first video, don't worry. I got you. We're gonna go ahead and attach that to the end so that you'll have it. So at the start of our conversation in chapter 2, Chuck is in his early 20s. He's got this awesome union job and he's raising his little boy, and he's been a union rep for the last couple of years there at this rubber factory. And he's also gotten a chance to work on some local campaigns, which is awesome, including the campaign to re-elect Ann Richards. She was governor of Texas in 1992. Then something awesome happens to Chuck, and I'm gonna let you tell him. Wait, I'm gonna let him tell it. I was one of 3 steelworkers out of 30 organizers across the nation who were asked to be part of the campaign called Labor 96. I was the youngest by 15 years, the only Latino, and only one of 3 people of color. So I really like this part of the book. You know, it's really cool to get to see Chuck experience all of these new things as this kid fresh out of Tyler, Texas. I especially like his first. I have been waiting a long time to say that. His first. The first time he gets into an airplane, because it just reminds me of the first time I got into an airplane. I was 16 and it was 1995, and I was on my way to Oakland from Seattle to the Million Man March watch party with a group of supporters. Y'all remember the Million Man March? Link. So a few more firsts for Chuck would include his first time as a member of a paid staff, his first time living outside of Tyler, Texas, and a really good first for the 90s, and that is getting to ride in your first limo. And I don't know if limos are still a thing, but in the 90s, if you could get in a limo, like it was the thing. Is it still a thing? I don't think it's a thing. So after the Labor 96 campaign was over and that group of 30 went back to their respective factories or jobs, only one remained, right? They only kept one person. That's right. It was Chuck. He was just too good at what he did. And so instead of having him go back into the factory, they paid him to basically go to activist boot camp.
Let's do this.
I mean, you lucky duck. Here's how Chuck explains it in the book. After that, everybody went back to work except for me. David kept me out, and I started working on special elections for the AFL-CIO all over the Southwest. I helped win a number of races, including Ciro Rodriguez in San Antonio, and lost a lot of elections in New Mexico before going back to work in the factory for a while. And I really like how he points out his losses. You know, again, I'm just gonna go back to, I think Chuck is a very humble man, because he didn't win 100% of the time. Nobody does. And if you're an activist, it is not always going to be smooth sailing, and you lose about as much as you win, right? But it's part of learning about the struggle. It's part of pushing through a society that doesn't want things for basic people. So this is the part of the book that we have all been waiting for.
Yes! Yeah!
Yes!
This is the part where the Bernie and Chuck dynamic duo was formed.
Let's be honest, Bernie's winning the Latino vote. Yeah, I want to go here. These are the policies that really speak to Latinos.
And it happened humbly at the Hunan Dynasty restaurant on Capitol Hill. But before we get to that meeting, guys, here's a couple more things that Chuck got to experience for the first time along the way. For the first time ever, Chuck had his own staff, so he was in charge of other people's days. For the first time ever, he also started a company, Solidarity Strategies. In the midst of all of that learning, he was an entrepreneur. My goodness. But by far, guys, the most important first in this part of the book was the birth of his twin grandsons. Now, if you follow him on Twitter, you have seen these adorable boys before. He is a very proud papa. Let's just listen. Every day I went to that office, when the times were hard and frustrating, I would think about the Rocha boys and my son. I would remind myself why I was doing this and why my righteous anger was focused in the right way on making real change for those boys. Okay, back to the Hunan restaurant. I know I said I was going to tell you like what happened at that meeting, but the truth is, in the book, really not a whole lot happened. You know, they ate dinner, they talked about like current events, they talked about local strategies, and they really just worked on building solidarity. Hashtag DSA. And actually, even Bernie mentioned to Chuck that they had actually already that they had already met, just for a smidge, at this union strategies meeting a few years back. So they were at least, you know, aware of one another. I mean, how could you not be aware of Bernie, though? But Bernie was aware of Chuck, is what I'm trying to say here. This ensemble was actually put together by a meeting that took place between Chuck and this guy. All right, humans, I want you to prepare yourself for what's coming next. And I want you to be brave. Be brave. So if you were a Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016, then it's easy to look at an image of Hillary Clinton and see her.
How about a little fire, Scarecrow?
In a bad light, right? But we are not going to do that here today. No, we are not going to do that. Now, don't leave, stick with me. I want to talk about some character traits between the two campaigns that come up in the book, between the Hillary Clinton campaign for 2016 and the Bernie Sanders campaign for 2016. And I can do it all in less than 1 minute of talking. When CHUCK ROCHA's firm, Solidarity Services, reached out to the Clinton campaign and the Sanders campaigns, they got two very different responses. The Clinton campaign responded by bringing him in, letting him have a nice lunch at a really pretty building, and then politely telling him to leave. They also never called him back. The only reason he found out he did not get the job was because one of his friends said, "Hey dude, you can't pass the vetting." When he reached out to the Sanders campaign, Jeff Weaver took a look at his proposal, gave him an actual phone call, and said, "Let's do this." And then Chuck said, "Wait a second, Jeff, I'm not going to be able to pass the vetting. I didn't pass it for the Clinton campaign." And he said, "We already knew that, Chuck. How long are you supposed to pay for a mistake that you made back then that you've already paid for? Are you supposed to pay for this for the rest of your life?" It shows that the Clinton campaign was really more focused on image and perception, while the Sanders campaign was focused on substance and getting the job done. That, my friends, is a very different kind of campaign. I think we need more politics like Sanders and less like Clinton. So chapter 4 is kind of like Mighty Mouse. It is super powerful, but super small. That is because it is a very detailed description about how the campaign, through trial and error, created a foundation for the Latino outreach program of 2020. back in 2016. It is authentic, it is grassroots based, it is organic, and it is something that has set the bar for 21st century activism that also takes into account cultural diversity. They know, for example, that Latinos in Pennsylvania are not going to vote the same way that Latinos in Arizona are going to vote, or that the Hispanic population in Florida is vastly different than the Hispanic population in Seattle. You know, it's actually taking into account cultural diversity when it comes to what people want in a large community. And it just took Bernie and Chuck. And that, guys, is how part 1 of Tio Bernie by Chuck Rocha wraps up. Part 2 of Tio Bernie is called Joining the Revolution. And so we get a chance to meet all of these new people. We get a chance to see some behind the scenes conversations and actions. Bernie goes for an interesting walk. We'll get to that on the next video. If you've made it this far, thanks so much. I think you are super cool for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.